I'm Noah, and I'm 24 now. But this story starts when I was 17, right around the time I learned that some people will destroy what they don't understand just because they can. Back then, I lived in a small house on the outskirts of Milwaukee with my parents and younger brother, Josh. From the outside, we probably looked like a normal family. Dad worked in construction, Mom did accounting for a local law firm, and I was the quiet kid who always had charcoal on his fingers and paint under his nails. But on the inside, it was different. My parents didn't believe in dreams. They believed in paychecks, stability, and what they called practical ambition. Anything else, anything creative, was, in their words, a waste of time and a one-way ticket to nowhere. My obsession with painting started when I was 11. I still remember the first time I saw a Bob Ross rerun on PBS. Something about the way he brought a blank canvas to life, it lit something in me. At first, I drew in secret. Scribbled trees and crooked skies in the margins of my math notebooks, used the backs of grocery lists for sketches, even stole printer paper when I had to. But eventually, I saved up enough to buy a cheap set of acrylics from the dollar store. And that's when I really started creating. My room became a mess of canvases propped up against the walls, paint-streaked shirts, and the constant scent of linseed oil. I was happy. I was in my own world. And I thought that maybe, just maybe, if I got good enough, my parents would see what I saw. That hope died one rainy Friday in October, a week before my 18th birthday. I'd just finished my largest piece yet. It was a massive abstract painting, vivid blues clashing against searing reds, shadows of hands emerging from waves. It was the first time I felt like I'd captured something real, something raw. I stayed up all night perfecting it, and when morning came, I actually brought it downstairs to show them. Dad was reading the paper, coffee in hand. Mom was sorting laundry. I stood there, heart pounding, holding this canvas like it was a piece of my soul. And I said, quietly, I think I finally got it right. They barely looked up. Dad gave this scoff, this short, dismissive breath through his nose, and said, "What is that supposed to be?" Mom added without looking up, "Is this why your grades are slipping?" I told them it wasn't about school, that it was more than a hobby, that I was going to apply to art school in Chicago. I still remember the silence that followed. That thick, lead-heavy silence that always came before something awful. Dad stood up. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He just walked over, took the painting out of my hands, opened the back door, and tossed it into the fire pit. I was so stunned I didn't move. I just watched him grab a bottle of lighter fluid and strike a match. And as flames engulfed the canvas, he looked at me and said, "This trash will never be worth anything, Noah. Stop embarrassing yourself." Josh was in the living room. He saw the whole thing. He didn't say a word. Just turned the volume up on the TV like none of it mattered. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked back to my room, shut the door, and sat on my bed in complete silence. That night, I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just stared at my wall, which still had paint smears from where I leaned finished canvases. And I realized something. I'd never convinced them. I could paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, and they'd still find a reason to mock it. So I stopped trying. I didn't stop painting, though. I just stopped letting them see it. I started working weekends at a bookstore downtown. Saved every penny. When I had enough, I bought cheap canvases from a salvage shop 2 neighborhoods over. I'd store my supplies in a locked trunk under my bed and only paint at night, using a clip-on lamp and earbuds so no one could hear the brush strokes. I didn't post anything online. I didn't tell friends. It was mine. My private rebellion. My quiet survival. The next year, I got a partial scholarship to a community college. My parents assumed I was studying graphic design. They didn't ask, and I didn't correct them. I used the classes to build a portfolio and secretly applied to 3 art schools out of state. When I got into one, on a full ride, I packed up my stuff while my parents were at work and left a note that just said, "Thanks for everything." I moved to Denver. Lived in a dingy apartment with peeling wallpaper and no heat in the winter, but I was free. And more than that, I was finally around people who understood me. People who didn't laugh when I said I wanted to create something that made people feel. Professors who pushed me. Classmates who challenged me. I sold my first painting in my second year for $2,000. It felt unreal, like someone was paying me to breathe. The years passed. I graduated, took odd jobs, painted during the day and bartended at night. Got my own studio space, tiny, but it was mine. My work started gaining traction online. A collector in New York bought one. Then a gallery reached out. Then another. By 24, I'd sold 12 pieces at five-figure prices. One, a piece titled Ashes, had bidding wars between two wealthy clients. I didn't even plan that title. It just came out. And then came the gallery opening. A massive white-walled space in Chicago. Spotlights, wine glasses, murmured voices. I was standing in the corner, nervous out of my mind, when I saw them, my parents, walk through the door. I don't know how they found out. Maybe Josh told them. Maybe they saw the flyer online. But there they were. My dad in a stiff blazer. My mom in her pearls. Both of them looking like they'd just walked into a stranger's home. And then they saw Ashes. It was the center of the exhibit, lit up like it was sacred. Deep crimson streaks with charcoal black at the edges. A scorched canvas reborn. The plaque read, Ashes, 2018. Original burned in 2017. Recreated from memory. Estimated value, $500,000. I saw their faces. The way my mom's mouth parted slightly. The way Dad's eyes narrowed, then widened, then narrowed again. They didn't say anything. They just stood there, frozen, while guests murmured around them and collectors asked to speak to the artist. And I didn't walk up to them. I didn't say a word. Because in that moment, I didn't need to. But that's not the end. Not even close. Because 3 days later, I got a call from a blocked number. Then another. Then a voicemail. My mom, her voice sweet and shaky, saying, Honey, we should really talk. We're proud of you. Your father and I. Please call us when you have a second. That was just the beginning. I didn't call her back. Not at first. I sat on that voicemail for a full week, letting it sit in my inbox like a ticking time bomb. I must have replayed it a dozen times, trying to decode the sudden change in tone. This was the same woman who once told me that real jobs don't come with brushes and daydreams. Now she was proud of me. My father, the same man who threw my work into a fire without blinking, was suddenly interested in talking? No, they weren't proud. They were stunned. And stunned people get desperate. After the voicemail came the emails. At first, short and polite. We were so impressed with your exhibit. You've come so far. Let's reconnect. Then they grew more familiar, almost clingy. Your father and I would love to fly you home sometime. Josh wants to see you too. I didn't believe that for a second. Josh and I hadn't spoken in 5 years. Last I heard, he dropped out of community college and was working at the same job our dad had gotten him. Some warehouse gig he hated but refused to leave. Still, I didn't respond. Not out of spite, really. More out of confusion. I didn't know how to talk to people who had burned my future in front of me, then only showed up when the price tag got big enough to interest them. I didn't know if I wanted to yell, cry, or laugh in their faces. So instead, I did what I always do when I'm overwhelmed. I painted. The next piece I made was quiet. Smaller. A single tree in the center of a black canvas, surrounded by ash-colored leaves. I called it They Only Come in Spring. It sold within a week. A month later, I got a knock on my studio door. I wasn't expecting anyone. It was late afternoon, and I was halfway through cleaning brushes. When I opened it, I didn't even recognize the woman standing there for a second. Her hair was shorter than I remembered. She was wearing a pale blue scarf I hadn't seen before. But her voice, soft, cautious, hit me like a thunderclap. Noah, it was my mother. For a second, I didn't say anything. I just stared at her. She gave a small, hopeful smile like this was some kind of reunion scene in a made-for-TV movie. I didn't return it. Instead, I opened the door wider, not out of kindness, but because I wanted her to see exactly what she'd been ignoring all these years. The canvases, the awards on the shelf, the half-finished works drying in the corner. She stepped inside like she was walking into a cathedral. I've been trying to reach you, she said softly, turning slowly to take it all in. You've done, well, far better than we thought you would. I leaned back against the wall and crossed my arms. You mean better than you hoped I wouldn't? That one stung. I saw it flash across her face. She let out a shaky breath. We were scared. Your father and I, we didn't know how to support something we didn't understand. Art. It never made sense to us. I shrugged. It didn't have to. You just had to let it matter to me. There was silence for a while. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out something that stopped my heart for half a second. A photo. A printed picture of the original painting they had burned. I had forgotten anyone ever took one. It was blurry, probably from her phone back then, but unmistakable. The colors, the hands, the chaos. We didn't destroy this because we hated it. she said, placing the photo gently on the nearest table. We destroyed it because we were scared of losing you. Scared that you'd waste your life chasing something that wouldn't give anything back. And instead, I said, staring at the image, you made sure it couldn't. I don't know if she teared up or if the light just caught her differently in that moment. But when she spoke next, her voice cracked just enough to sound real. I'm sorry. 2 words. Too late. Too heavy. Too empty. I don't need an apology, I said. I needed a family back then. She didn't argue, just nodded, like she knew it wouldn't change anything. Then she looked at me and asked something I didn't expect. Can we come to your next showing? It hung there between us like smoke in a small room. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, trying to find something genuine behind the practiced face. And maybe, just maybe, it was there. Regret, buried under layers of pride and fear and too many years of pretending they were always right. But before I could answer, there was a knock at the door again. This time it was Josh. He stepped into the studio like he owned the place, sunglasses on, phone in hand. He didn't even look around before blurting, "Yo, Mom." He's not answering his texts either. Let's just ask him now. Then he saw me, paused. "Noah, bro, long time." I didn't move. Neither did he. And then he smiled. That same crooked, smug smile from the last time I saw him, when he watched my painting burn and said nothing. "We've got a proposal for you," he said, sliding his sunglasses onto his head. "You're famous now, right? $500,000 a painting? Look, Dad's not doing too great financially, and I've got some stuff I'm trying to launch, so get out," I said, without raising my voice. He blinked. "What?" I pointed to the door. "You heard me." Josh laughed, like I'd made a joke. "Come on, man. Don't be like that. We're family." That word. Family. I stepped closer. "You weren't family when you sat there while they humiliated me. You weren't family when you watched that painting burn and laughed. You weren't family when I left, and none of you called for 5 years." He looked caught off guard, like the words were hitting harder than expected. "You don't get to show up now and pretend we're close because I finally have something you want." My mom stepped in, trying to calm the situation. "Noah, honey, he didn't mean it that way." I looked at her. Then how did he mean it? She didn't answer. The silence between us thickened. Josh shoved his hands in his pockets and muttered, "Whatever, man. You'll come around. We'll talk later." And then they left. But that wasn't the last I heard from them. The next week, something happened that made it clear they weren't going to just walk away quietly. They had a plan, a legal one. And when I opened the envelope that arrived on my doorstep 3 days later, I realized just how far they were willing to go. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, with my full name typed neatly on the front. No return address. At first, I thought it might be from a gallery or a collector, someone who didn't believe in email, maybe. But as soon as I picked it up, I felt the weight of it. Not just physically, but emotionally. Something about it felt off. I sat down at my drafting table and opened it slowly, careful not to tear anything. Inside was a stack of neatly clipped papers, a printed letter on legal stationery, and, of all things, a copy of my birth certificate. The letter began formally. To Mr. Noah A. Whitmer, it has come to our attention, following a review of recent public disclosures of asset holdings and earnings attributed to your artwork, that there exists an unresolved legal matter related to your upbringing and parental financial support. My eyes darted down the page, skimming for keywords, and then they jumped to a bolded line near the end. The Whitmer family hereby reserves the right to claim partial entitlement to proceeds earned from artwork produced using resources, housing, and supplies provided by the family household during the years 2005 to 2017. This includes, but is not limited to, access to utilities, housing, nourishment, and academic materials that supported your development. I had to reread that part 3 times. They were claiming ownership, partial ownership, of my work. My parents. The same people who destroyed my painting, who mocked my dream, who threw me out of their lives without hesitation. They were now saying that because they had provided a roof over my head as a child, they deserved a cut. It didn't stop there. The second half of the letter outlined a proposed settlement, which would include a one-time payment of $150,000 as acknowledgement of support, royalties on any artwork created between 2017 and 2022 at a rate of 5%, priority family rights to retain or display one original work per year at no cost. At the bottom was a signature line, already signed by both my parents and, of course, Josh. Underneath his signature, he had written in parentheses, "Future business manager of Whitmer Fine Arts." I didn't know whether to laugh or throw the envelope into the nearest trash bin. Instead, I stood up, walked to the small cabinet where I kept older pieces of mine, tucked in archival sleeves. I pulled out the oldest one I still had, a charcoal sketch of a raven perched on a rusted mailbox. I drew it in the library my senior year of high school, long after the fire. It was the first thing I created after swearing they'd never see another piece of my art again. I held it for a moment, tracing the edges with my thumb, before sliding it back in and locking the cabinet. Then I called my lawyer. Yeah, I have one now. Not just for contracts and sales, but because the art world can be messy. Galleries steal, clients flake, and apparently, families try to invoice you for your childhood once you make something of yourself. Her name's Leah. She's sharp, fast, and doesn't like wasting time. Please tell me you're calling to say you need a trademark filed, and not that your parents are suing you. I sighed. Not yet, but they're circling. I read the letter out loud to her. She was quiet the entire time. When I finished, she asked me to scan it and send it over immediately. 2 hours later, I got her reply. Noah, this letter is total nonsense. It's not a real legal claim. It's a threat disguised as a settlement offer. They're hoping you'll pay to make them go away. Do not respond. Leave this to me. Also, please tell me you haven't signed anything from them recently. Leah, I hadn't, of course. But the fact that she had to ask told me all I needed to know. That week, I got 3 more letters. The second one was friendlier, filled with family photos and handwritten notes from my mom talking about how she missed me. That one included an invitation to a family dinner to talk everything through. I almost tore that one in half right then, but I stopped. Not because I wanted to go, but because I was starting to realize what was really going on. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted association. They wanted the illusion of being the family behind a rising star. They saw the attention, the headlines, the upcoming exhibits, and they realized how much they'd thrown away. And instead of apologizing with any shred of humility, they decided to rewrite the story, to make themselves look like supportive parents who raised a genius. Josh, of course, was the worst. He sent a long, rambling email with links to marketing companies and brand consultants, talking about how, with the right push, you could be in museums by next year. Then, near the end, he added, also, Dad's going through some stuff. His back's real bad now, and he can't work much. It'd mean a lot if you helped out. I know you've got the means now. The nerve. The same man who stood over the fire pit and lit a match without blinking was now suddenly a struggling victim who deserved my sympathy. I didn't reply to any of them, but I did make one phone call to someone I hadn't spoken to since high school. Ms. Harlow. She was my old art teacher, the only adult in my life back then who ever believed in what I was doing, the one who'd given me access to the school's studio after hours, who bought me extra brushes out of her own pocket, who once told me, if they can't see your worth now, they'll trip over it later. She picked up on the third ring. Noah, she said, her voice warm and surprised. Is that really you? I smiled. Yeah, I just wanted to say you were right. We talked for nearly an hour. I told her about the show, the collectors, the pieces, the money. And then, slowly, I told her about the letter, the demands, the sudden reappearance of the people who'd once treated me like a stain on their idea of success. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something I'll never forget. They only come around when they realize the garden they tried to burn down grew without them. And I knew then what I had to do. I wasn't going to pay them. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to show the world exactly who they were. But first, I needed one more painting. I spent the next 2 weeks in my studio like a man possessed. Everything else went on hold. Emails, commissions, even sleep. I worked through sunrise and into night with only the company of the low hum of the heater and the faint scent of turpentine hanging in the air. It wasn't just about catharsis anymore. This wasn't a therapeutic project. This was my statement, my boundary, my revenge, not loud, not cruel, but clear. The painting that emerged was unlike anything I'd ever done before. A large canvas, nearly 6 feet tall, with textured layers so thick they looked like the paint itself was trying to claw its way out. In the center stood a boy with outstretched arms, offering a delicate, glowing shape in his hands. His face was blurred, almost erased, as if the world around him had been trying to wipe him away. Behind him stood towering, faceless figures, each one casting long, smoky shadows, shadows that swallowed light. But the shape in the boy's hands, an ember, flickering gold and blue, glowed through the dark. It was the only source of color untouched by the shadows. I called it inheritance, a quiet jab, a title that would mean nothing to strangers but cut deep for those who knew the context. I contacted my gallery and asked them to include it in the upcoming showcase, my biggest yet. They were thrilled. The buzz around my last exhibit had turned heads, and they'd already lined up journalists and collectors from New York and even London. Inheritance would be the final piece displayed, the anchor of the night. I didn't tell them what it was about. I didn't have to. The emotion on the canvas was enough. When the night came, I arrived an hour early. Dressed in black, hair tied back, quiet as always. I walked the floor once, slowly, taking in my own work. And then I waited. They arrived 30 minutes after the doors opened. I saw them from across the room. My father, stiff in an old suit that didn't quite fit. My mother, clutching her purse like a lifeline. And Josh, chewing gum like he was crashing a frat party. They looked out of place among the sharp-dressed crowd, the murmuring critics and art lovers sipping sparkling wine. They didn't see me at first. They saw inheritance. The moment they approached the piece, the room fell away. My mother's face went pale, her eyes scanning the boy in the center, her lips parting in disbelief. My father stood still, silent for once. And Josh, ever the commentator, gave a low whistle. "Damn," he muttered. "That's got to be about us." I stepped out from the side just as he said it. "It is." They turned. And there I was, close enough to see the flicker in my mother's eyes, to watch my father's jaw clench. Josh grinned, as if he still thought this was salvageable. "Noah," my mom said softly, "this is beautiful. Really, we're proud of you. You've come so far." I didn't smile. Funny, I got here the minute I left. She flinched like I'd slapped her. My dad looked around, uncomfortable now that attention was shifting toward us. A few guests had paused, sensing the tension. Josh leaned in. "Look, bro, you've made your point. You're a success, all right? So what's next? Maybe we sit down, talk business." "No," I said. He blinked. "No." I pulled something from my coat. An envelope, identical to the one they'd sent me weeks before. I handed it to my mother. "What's this?" she asked, turning it over. "Consider it a counter-proposal." They opened it. Inside was a letter. Just one paragraph. "This document acknowledges that the undersigned, Noah Whitmer, does not owe, nor will ever owe, any compensation, recognition, or share of profits to members of the Whitmer family for any artistic or personal achievement past, present, or future. Any further attempts to pursue financial claims, public misrepresentation, or coercive contact will be met with legal action. Signed, Noah A. Whitmer." Attached was a cease and desist, prepared by Leah. My father crumpled the paper in his fist. "You really think you can cut us off like this?" "I didn't cut you off," I said, meeting his glare. "You did. 7 years ago, when you made me choose between your approval and my art. I chose. You just didn't expect the choice to matter." Josh muttered something under his breath, but I didn't care anymore. This was the final canvas. The last confrontation. My mom tried one more time, her voice trembling. "But we're still your family." I shook my head slowly. "No, your blood. That's not the same thing." And then I walked away. I didn't storm out. I didn't make a scene. I just returned to my corner near the champagne table, where collectors were already beginning to ask questions about inheritance, where critics whispered words like haunting and profound. Within an hour, the painting had 5 offers. By midnight, it sold for $520,000. I donated a portion to a local art school scholarship fund in my teacher Ms. Harlow's name. The rest? I used to open my own studio. A full space, 3 rooms, 2 apprentices, and a gallery attached. I called it Ember House, a tribute to the ashes where it all started. As for my family, they tried to contact me a few more times. Letters, calls, even a message from an old neighbor trying to guilt-trip me into forgiving and forgetting. I didn't respond. Leah handled everything. Eventually, they stopped. I heard through a friend back home that Josh was still bouncing between jobs. My dad had to retire early. My mom apparently tells people she's closely connected to a famous artist in Chicago. I suppose, in a way, she is, just not in the way she imagined. And me? I kept painting, but I never recreated inheritance. Some things don't need to be said twice. Some stories are only meant to burn once.